Joining us now, the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He's also a member of the Judiciary and Budget Committees. Congressman, good morning. It's good to see you. So you all have a caucus meeting at 9 o'clock this morning where Speaker Pelosi is expected to lay out next steps in the impeachment process. What do you expect to hear from the Speaker, and what does come next? How soon will there be a trial and a transmission of those articles over to the Senate?
Well, good morning. It's great to be with you. Once again, I think we're going to first and foremost keep the focus on the underlying behavior by the president. We know that Donald Trump corruptly pressured a foreign government to target an American citizen for political gain, undermined our national security, abused his power. That's why we acted anchored in the principle that in America, no one is above the law. That's also why we believe that the Senate must conduct a fair trial. So there'll be some discussion of that, and of course there'll be a robust discussion about next steps. When exactly should we transmit the articles of impeachment over? And it'll be a discussion that will be led by Speaker Pelosi, I presume in partnership with Chairman Nadler as well as Chairman Schiff.
So, Congressman, there are even some Democrats who are asking now that you all in the House have been holding on to the articles of impeachment. By the time the Senate trial starts, it will have been a month since you voted to impeach the president. What exactly did you all accomplish in that month in holding those articles back from the Senate?
Well, most importantly, we've been able to have a discussion about the principle that the overwhelming majority of the American people agree with, that there should be a fair trial in the Senate. And a fair trial would involve witnesses who are important, including individuals like John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney. It should also include documents. Given the extraordinarily serious nature of the charges that resulted in the impeachment of Donald Trump. And so we've seen additional information that has come to light, including that it was clear that the president withheld, at his direction, the $391 million in military aid to a vulnerable Ukraine without justification in order to pressure the Ukrainian government as part of this shakedown scheme. That's come to light, and John Bolton's willingness to testify has also come to light. Those are two very important things.
If the goal, though, was to get a fair trial in the Senate, have you seen any evidence in that month that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has changed his posture at all, that he's changed from his position where he said, we're never going to vote to convict this president? In fact, he said, I'm working with the White House on a strategy. Do you have any evidence? Do you have any information you can share that Mitch McConnell has changed his stance and, in fact, allowed a fair trial here?
There's no reason to believe that Mitch McConnell will ever change his perspective as it relates to essentially running the Senate like it's a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump administration. But what is important in this regard is that you have seen multiple Republican senators, including most recently Mitt Romney, but also Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, publicly indicate that they want to see a fair trial, that they'd like to see witnesses, that amongst those witnesses who should be called are individuals like John Bolton. So that's progress that hadn't necessarily taken place. And had we immediately sent over the articles, then Mitch McConnell may have attempted to simply dismiss the case that was sent over, as the president is urging his friends in the Senate to do.
Congressman Casey Hunt has a question for you. Case?
Hey, Congressman, good morning. We expect, of course, the House Speaker to take the next step, and part of that involves naming managers. And I realize a lot of, perhaps most of what's going on in the Senate is about Mitch McConnell, as you've been laying out. However, if you look back at what happened during the Clinton impeachment and you think about the process generally, the managers have a significant role to play. You all are going to be the prosecutors, and I realize you probably can't tell us if Speaker Pelosi is going to put you on that list of managers, but the expectation is that you would be in consideration for that. And I'm wondering, what is the strategy among House Democrats for how to influence this process once you're on the floor of the Senate? What can you do? How can you present this case to the American people that could potentially make what seems like a preordained process perhaps have some dramatic twists and turns?
Well, from the very beginning of this process, we've indicated, given the nature of the extraordinary charges that were leveled and we believe proved in the House as relates to the president, that we need to be serious, we need to be solemn, we need to be sober in undertaking this moment of presidential accountability. And we need to continue that as we move over to the Senate. That's first and foremost. But secondarily, we also are going to continue to follow the facts, apply the law, be guided by the Constitution, and simply present the truth to the American people. And as long as we continue to do that, yes, there's a case to be made to the Senate, but ultimately the American people are equally significant in terms of being the decision makers as to whether the president engaged in wrongdoing or not. And poll after poll has made clear that they believe that the president did something wrong by soliciting foreign interference in the 2020 election. That's unacceptable.
All right, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.